Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/malicious compliance. In today's episode, apartment complex rented my apartment while I still had an active lease. Keep bowling, the pro shop will fix it? Okay. Forced to honor contract and then asked to sign a new one. Clean the quick mixer? You got it, boss. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Apartment complex rented my apartment while I still had an active lease. Arkansas has well-known laws that lean heavily on the side of the property owner, which leaves the renter pretty vulnerable to owners who want to be difficult, to say the least. Or at least they did when I lived there. I doubt much has changed since. So I move into town and find a two-halves apartment, intending for it to be a short period of time while I scout the town and look for a more permanent place. As for paying rent, they couldn't take an automatic monthly check from my bank or charge my debit card monthly. It had to be a paper check from me, with a 4-day late fee window. I hate writing checks and I had the cash, so I paid out the 12-month lease all at once. I find a great place about 6 months later, thinking I'll just break my lease and pay the extra 1-month penalty and walk away from my apartment. I call and let them know I'll be moving out. Long conversation short, the way the lease is written makes you think that's how it works, when in reality, at a second or third read, I'm still liable for the entire 12-month lease, and to break the lease essentially adds a 13th month worth of rent money. Knowing that up front, why anybody would break a lease is beyond me. So at this point I've already made the deposits on my new place when all this comes to light, so I'm stuck with two places. I tell the apartment complex I won't be moving out, figure I'll just go ahead and let the lease run out, set the AC to 80 and open the breakers to keep costs low. I slowly move my stuff to my new place since I have plenty of time now, and in the end I leave behind my ironing board and iron just to leave something, and I never really use them anyways. About 2 months later I get a call from the power company asking if it's okay to transfer power into somebody else's name. Shocked, I reply, absolutely not, while laughing a little on the inside. I decide to give it a day before I call the apartment complex. First thing the next morning I get a call from the apartment complex, and with a super snarky entitled tone I hear, "We need you to drop the power from your name so the new tenant can take over and move in." I explain that I still have an active lease on the place and can't fathom why they'd rent it out. She accuses me of abandonment and therefore she is allowed to rent the apartment. My reply went along the lines of, "I rent that apartment with the sole intent of having somewhere to iron my clothes. Did you not see my iron and ironing board there?" She said she did, and she took it to the office to get it out of the apartment. We go back and forth on the semantics for a little. I let her know that I'm open to receiving a refund to the date on the new tenant's lease, and at that time I'd be happy to drop my name from the power. She refused and the call ended with getting her boss's number from corporate. After mentioning to her boss that I can recognize a breach of contract when I see it, and that nowhere in the lease does it say I actually have to live there, not to mention her employee admitted to entering my apartment and stealing items of mine from inside. She quickly assured me they are putting a check in the mail that day refunding my money to the first of that month, and told me I could go to the office to pick up my iron and board anytime. Yes, I know they could have run up the power bill, but they'd only be able to do so much really, and a few days isn't that huge, and they didn't do it anyways. Even if they had, it would still be worth the expense considering the refund. Keep bowling, the pro shop will fix it? Okay. I had forgotten about this until recently and thought I would share. I think it fits in here. It isn't a huge thing, but it resulted in me getting something I wanted but couldn't afford and then winning money with it. When I was younger and through my early to mid-adult years I was an avid bowler. 200 plus average back when that actually meant you were good, before the bowling ball technology boom, which comes into play here. And I worked at the local bowling center from the time I was 16 though 21 or so, and then again later on in my early 20s, working the back, pin setters, front of the house, etc. So knew how things operated, what could go wrong, etc. I was bowling at a different center one day. The first frame, after each shot, my ball came back with a small nick out of it. Nothing major, but yeah. So I put that ball away and brought out an old ball that I never use, but was in one of my bags. Next 2 or 3 shots, another nick each time. 4th frame it finally came back with a fairly large chunk taken out of it. Usually that means there is a nail or a screw that has worked its way loose and the ball is catching on it, or a piece of metal has broken near the ball lift and is cutting into it. I take the ball up to the counter and tell the manager and show him what had happened. Now, I was only 4 frames into the game and said I would move, and he said no, they couldn't move me as they had a party coming in and no lanes available. He said just keep bowling and the pro shop will repair the ball. I asked if he was sure, he said yup, he will go in and tell them to fix it and the center would pay for it. Most pro shops are individually owned and operated, the owner rents the space from the center, this was no exception. Now, having done simple pro shop work, I know for a fact there is no way it can be fixed if I keep bowling with it, and this keeps happening. One gouge can be repaired fairly easily as long as it is not in the track of the ball. The track is the contact point where your ball rolls down the lane, so anything in that line just can't be fixed, and will throw off the ball as it rolls since it can't be perfectly rounded back. Depending on the core of the ball, and how you throw it, the track can be 3 to 4 inches wide as the ball flares going down the lane. But massive multiple gouges all over the place? Nope. So I keep bowling 2 or 3 games, knowing that I am getting a new bowling ball out of this. Of course the huge chunks keep coming out of the ball. I get finished and there probably isn't a 2-inch by 2-inch section of the ball that isn't damaged. I take the ball into the pro shop and the conversation goes. Pro shop guy, what the hell happened to this ball? Did it get hung up in the pin setter or something? Me, the lane I was on damaged it each time I threw it, the manager said you would fix it. Pro shop guy, why did you keep bowling? I can't fix this. Me, the manager told me to keep bowling after I showed him the first gouge. Pro shop guy then calls in the manager of the center. Pro shop guy, I know you said he was bringing in a damaged ball, but did you tell him to keep bowling after you saw the damage? Center manager, yeah, we couldn't move him, so I told him to just bowl out his games and you would fix it. Pro shop guy, I can't fix this. You are going to have to replace his ball. Manager, what? Bunch of arguing back and forth about why it can't be fixed, the ball I have they don't carry, etc. Fine, replace it with anything on the wall except for the Excalibur. The Excalibur was almost 50% more expensive than regular bowling balls. It was the first reactive resin ball on the market. Reactive resin is a compound that made the ball hook much more than a traditional urethane ball. It revolutionized the game, and ruined it according to some, since it allowed average/below average bowlers to suddenly improve drastically due to not having to be anywhere near as accurate, and took a lot of the skill from the game, but I digress. Me, so I can pick any ball other than the Excalibur and you will pay for it, drilling and all? Manger, yes. Me, okay, thanks. Manager leaves. Me, can I have store credit for that ball on the wall, but then apply it to the Excalibur, and I will pay the difference? Pro shop guy, sure, we can do that. And proceeds to measure my hand and drills the ball, and I pay like $40 for what was then between a $150-$200 ball that I could not have afforded at the time. Bowled my second ever 300 game with it less than a month later and won 2 center tournaments with it, and a bunch of high game pot money during league play. That ball paid for itself 10x over in the first 2 months. Forced to honor contract and then asked to sign a new one. This was over 20 years ago, but I was reminded of it today and thought it would be appreciated here. When I was 16, I got my driver's license and a job delivering the newspaper. I had about 225 papers per day and 300 on Sundays. The pay was decent for a kid, and it only took about 2 hours to finish my deliveries. It was great in the summer. Then school started and it got really hard. I was sleeping in class and making mistakes. I had to wake up at 4 a.m. to deliver, and going to bed early meant I had a serious case of FOMO because my friends hung out until 8 or 9 every day. So I asked my boss if I could get out of my 6-month contract. He was super cool up until this point, and I honestly thought he'd let me slide as long as he had a replacement. I was wrong. He treated me like a villain and gave me the whole speech about honoring our commitments and how I need to learn respect for myself, and if I backed out of the contract then he'd come after me for a bunch of money and fees and penalties. Whatever. I only had 2 months left in my contract. My mom was super cool and would drive my route for me sometimes, and I went to bed earlier. About 2 weeks after the contract discussion with my boss, he stopped by my house to tell me about some changes with my route. He says, "Yeah, it'll be so great for the customer because instead of 6 a.m. they'll get their paper by 5 a.m. so you should see an increase in happy customers. Oh, and you'll be getting a small raise because from now on the paper won't be delivered to your house on a pallet. Instead you'll drive down to a town 15 minutes away and get your papers between 1:30 a.m. and 2:15 a.m. I mean, he pitched this to me like it was the greatest news ever. I reminded him that I'm in high school and I can't be waking up at 1 a.m., and I told him there's no way this is better for me. He kind of blew off my concerns and I said, "Don, my contract says that the papers will be delivered to my house no later than 4 a.m., and that it is my responsibility to deliver them by 6 a.m. That is what I agreed to, and that is what I will do until my contract is up." He again blew me off and said, "Oh yeah, no big deal, we'll get you a new contract with the changes, but the end date will be your original end date, so it's all good." I admit that I was not a super clever kid, but I began to see my out. I said I wasn't going to sign a new contract, and that I'd recently been taught that it's important to honor the deals we make and how important it was that I follow through with my commitments. He could hear the sarcasm dripping off my words and he thought he could power trip me into compliance. He got mad and threatened to fire me if I don't sign a new contract. I actually laughed at him and said that'd be great. I was a bit of a little shit to him at this point, and I told him if the papers showed up to my driveway before 4 a.m. then I'd deliver them, but if not then I'll consider it a breach of contract and I'd have to terminate my relationship with the newspaper. I was in a great mood and had no problems at all. It was actually my mom who was furious that they'd pull these changes on a high school kid trying to make an honest buck. I was just glad to never deliver another paper. Clean the quick mixer? You got it, boss. Years ago I worked for a high-end contracting company. It was a small business, about 10 people total, including the 3 owners. 2 were brothers and were in charge of large renovations, and the third was in charge of all the custom cabinetry and high-end furniture we made in the shop. He was my direct boss. I only ever interacted with the brothers occasionally, normally in the mornings and afternoon when they would come to pick up and drop off tools in the cargo van. Part of my shop duties every day included cleaning up their tools and putting them away, and I can't leave until it's done. Now the brothers had a bad habit of never washing of the mixing stick for cement. Every day it would come back caked in dried concrete that I'd have to spend up to an hour breaking off. I'd asked them several times to just wash it down with a hose after they used it, but was always met with "Oh yeah, we'll remember next time." After a few months of this I was getting pretty frustrated. One extremely hot summer day, I was sitting on the dock of the shop waiting for them. I was caked in sweat and sawdust from making cabinets all day and was in a bad mood. They pull up and we start unloading. Lo and behold, they hadn't cleaned the stick again. The base of it was practically a complete ball. Me, seriously? WTF? B1, oh yeah, sorry. Me, how hard is it to wash it off? I've asked for months. B2, it's your job to clean it, just clean it. Cue the compliance. I lifted it up, brought my arm back, and swung it as hard as I could at the side door of the cargo van. The sound of denting metal was huge. Most of the concrete blasted off of it. I handed the stick to the flabbergasted brother and said, "There, I cleaned it," before walking back into the shop. Both brothers wanted to fire me but couldn't, The third guy was my boss and refused. He told me a month later that every time he saw the dent he laughed. They always brought it back clean afterwards. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.